Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Josh Bohn is with us. We're going to talk about the best solutions for remote control, for codecs for on the road, and a great new technology that really allows radio broadcasters to do remotes from just about anywhere, reliably. It's coming up on this edition of TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by the new Ruby console from Lavo. See Lavo in your future at lavo.com/TWiRT. And by Omnia 11, because great sound matters most. Now shipping with the new GeForce Dynamics engine as standard. Omnia 11, great sound matters most. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. And we're so glad you're here. Got a great show up ahead for you. Going to learn a lot. I'm going to take a lot of notes. This is going to be a great show. I'm Kirk Harnack, the host of the show. Delighted that you're here with us. And I work for the folks at the Telos Alliance. Plus, I do TV weather, and I own some radio stations. I'm part owner. I own the part that doesn't make any money, which is why I do this show and work for the Telos Alliance. Also with me today, he's here. He's in his usual lair. Chris Tobin from New York City. Hey, Chris, welcome in.
Thanks, Kirk. All's going well. I'm having a good time in a voice booth. That's where I'm at. Nice plain walls behind.
Yeah. Yes, you're in the quality controlled room there. I'm in the uncontrolled quality room here. And remind me, what kind of mic is that? Is that it's one of them fancy Neumann mics or what?
Oh, it's fancy. It's so fancy. It's got rejection.
Yeah.
Unbelievable back end.
Oh, it's a Heil mic. Yeah. And you've got the Heil mic holder there too. Oddly,
Sweet.
I'm using a Heil mic holder, but I'm not using a Heil mic this week. I wanted to try this mic out because I just paid $250 to have it fixed. It's those who watch the. I'm sorry, Chris, I stepped on you. What?
No, I'm just trying something different. I'm not wearing headphones. I'm actually have the mix minus coming out of a small speaker directly behind the microphone.
Ah, okay. Well, sometimes I'm not hearing you.
You don't hear me?
Yeah, sometimes your mouth is moving and there's no audio.
How about that? I guess that's that mute button. How about that? Do you hear me now?
I hear you fine now. And I've heard you've been talking along. All of a sudden it goes away and then it comes back.
I can't explain that because the levels here seem to be consistent on the computer.
It just cut out twice in that sentence.
Well, I'll be.
I don't know.
Interesting. Okay.
It's almost like your louder parts trigger a ducking. Yep. No audio.
Nothing.
Nothing. Well, tell you what. We're going to let Chris work on that problem because he's in a $high studio there. So, hey, if there's an engineer in the house, so it'll get figured out, whatever it is.
Let me get him on the phone right now. How about that?
All right, let's go see the face of the laughter that's going on here. It's our giggle guy for the show. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Mr. Josh Bohn of Bohn Broadcast. Hello, Josh. Welcome in.
Oh, hi. How are you? Good to talk to you. Oh, there I am. I'm on here. This is wow. This is scary.
Well, don't get too enamored looking at yourself. There's a word for that. It's narcissism.
No, it's the whole mouth moving but not in sync with my lips is messing with me. So
no, that's just you. We're the rest of us are all.
Oh, good.
No, look at what you're sending. That works better if you look and. We should have talked about this. The little window that shows what you're sending. If you can drag that close to your webcam, then that provides the best illusion that you care what we're talking about.
Well, I'm looking at you, which seems to be what's working out best. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll be flattered. So we're off to a great start. I'm not sure what time we lost control of the show, but
I think it was about 10 minutes before we started. So yeah.
Well, there you go.
When I did the last minute engineering on my mic processor. So
well, there you go. So yeah, Josh had some trouble with. Yeah, let me hear it. Josh Bohn, Bohn, not Bone. Bohn.
Yeah.
What the heck kind of name is that?
That is
Bohn?
a German name. I get mispronounced as Bohn a lot.
Sure.
Where I grew up, there were Bohns and Bonds, and the Bohns were my uncle was a superintendent of the school district, and the Bohns ran the funeral home. So I used to get asked, "Do you teach people or do you bury people?" I'm like, "We teach people." Thank you.
Well, you know, there was a sales rep for Harris Corporation for years. I think it was his name was Will Bohn, but he spelled the Bone. Yes. I miss Will.
He spelled Bohn.
What, did he really?
I think he did, because I get asked a lot if I was related to him. I'm not, okay. But I get asked that fairly often. So
maybe you're right.
But yeah. So
did you ever meet a German guy who says, "If you don't pronounce it's the Autobahn, it's the Autobahn."
The Autobahn, yes.
All right, so if you're a watcher of the show, you may remember we had not Will Bohn, we had Josh Bohn on the show a few weeks ago from the NAB live. He was one of the many guests that we had on that day at the NAB, the last day of NAB. And Josh had some pretty intriguing things to tell us about, but we only had about 10 minutes with him, so we couldn't talk about those things in depth. So we're going to talk about those things in depth. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, is brought to you in part by the folks at Lavo and by the folks at the Telos Alliance. And we've got a great little short video to show you from the Telos Alliance, a 1-minute video with an Omnia 11 being installed in Rome, Italy. And Il Padrino, Frank Foti, is there, so you're going to want to watch out for that. So those will be coming up. I want to thank those sponsors right off the bat for making this show possible. We really appreciate them. And let's check in one more time with Chris. Chris, how's your microphone? Any improvement there?
Well, I haven't changed anything. The levels are appearing on the metering. Everything seems to be okay. No.
Well, you called the engineer, and the stuff got scared. That's what happens to me usually.
You will work as I tell.
All right. So we're gonna jump into our conversation with Josh, and Josh and I and Chris too. We have a few things to chat about that are kind of intriguing. We're going to get to there's a commercial product that Josh has worked hard to put together. We're going to save that toward the end of the show. It's called MaxxKonnect because it's a little bit of a commercial, but it's also an intriguing technology that I had always hoped could be done, and somehow Josh has worked through a big broker of stuff like wireless stuff and has gotten this done. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. I want to kind of hang that for last. But the point is, it's almost guaranteed QoS with wireless data connectivity. So that's really interesting.
And we tried it again yesterday at a major sporting event here in Birmingham, and our neighbors, another group from in town, had a Verizon modem, and ours rides on Verizon as well. We were literally 10 feet from each other. Theirs would not connect. Ours connected and worked flawlessly for 2 hours.
Wow. See, and that's what a great tease. You're going to want to stay tuned, folks, and listen about MaxxKonnect. It's really, really cool. Josh, I want to jump right in and talk about a few of the things that we talked about yesterday or before the show. And one of those is I want to jump into this idea of remote control and the way that you run a contract engineering firm, and you handle a lot of clients from little pipsqueak radio stations, kind of like some of my stations in Mississippi, up through medium size and even some larger stations. And you've got remote control solutions that work well in different size or different budgets. So I'm a little curious to hear about that, especially about, what would you do for a very minimal remote control? And I understand you're using SNMP quite a bit, which is, still kind of new to me. Let's just talk about remote control. When folks think about remote control, I grew up a lot with the sign systems. And so I'm, in my head, I'm just always kind of used to the dial up and push some buttons and hear some responses or control some things. And that was very 1980s,
Yes.
And very 1990s. And it was great technology at the time, but I know there's better solutions now. And my stations typically we don't quite have a budget for some of the Burke stuff. So, we're more of a Sicon-8 size budget probably. So anyway, I just like to know kind of where you lead people through in the remote control world. So please begin your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, it's funny you mentioned the Sicon-8 because that is what we typically use for smaller stations is Sicon-8s or SiteSentry4s. I have some of my local Birmingham clients are, they're smaller AMs and things like that. And if they don't change power, you've got one transmitter and a few minor things to monitor. A SiteSentry4 is less than $400. and it gives you full web connectivity, and lets you get in and it can do some self-remedying things. We had storms roll through last night here, and the AM will get, it'll kick off because of a lightning hit, and it's an older Harris Gates 5, and the restart circuitry on it doesn't work very well. So I put a restart sequence in the transmitter that if the high power preset indicator goes away, it waits 10 seconds, resets the faults, waits another 5, and then tries to kick it back to high power. And it's kept it on the air almost flawlessly for over a year on a little $400 box. That works well. That's even cheaper than a Sicon-8.
That's the SiteSentry4, and I was unfamiliar with that. I got to tell you, and you can dissuade me of my previous experience. I tried a Sicon-8 back when it was brand spanking new, and a number of things about it didn't work. And thankfully, the fellow at CircuitWerkes, I can't think of his name right now. What's his name?
Kyle McGrill.
Kyle McGrill. Yes. Kyle said, send it back. I've got some hardware and software updates for you. I'll do them for free. And he did send it back. And I still was having problems just wrapping my brain around how to make it work. And it still seemed like it just was not ready for prime time. And at some point I gave up on it and we installed some stuff that we knew. But you're saying now that the Sicon-8, and I assume the SiteSentry4, these are ready for prime time. They've been out there. They're good to go.
The SiteSentry4 especially, there have been a lot of firmware updates to it over the last few years. And I've worked with Kyle on some of those to remedy a lot of the reporting issues, because there were some logging issues and formatting. And, when it would send text messages, there would be garbage attached to them and things like that. He has worked out the majority of that. The Sicon-8, I know they've made leaps and bounds. They were limited because of the way some of the protocols were written in it, because, that's a 12-year-old product now. But it still does the majority of things that a lot of the bigger products do. There's a little bit of a learning curve to it, but it also costs a fourth of what a competing product from Burke or Davicom or something like that would be. You're not going to get the one of the things you're paying for with the Burke product, especially, and Burke makes great products. We do a lot of things with them as far as monitoring solutions. We're working with them on some bigger projects right now. One of the things you get from them for the added cost is the ease of setup. The Jet flowchart software to create your macros without having to worry about scripting, and the custom screen builder. You're not going to get that with anybody else, and those are some of the things that you pay the extra money for versus a product from CircuitWerkes or Broadcast Tools or a roll your own kind of remote control.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So I'm glad to hear that these two low-cost products at least have your seal of approval that they basically work. Chris Tobin, you're in a big market there. I got to believe you're probably using Burke or something else on the high end.
I am using Burke, but I also have a couple of stations I work with. One's a low power TV, the other's low power FM, and one has a Sicon-8, and the other one has the what do you call it? Broadcast Tool the Sentry4, right? Yeah. They work very nice.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. So, Josh, so at a low budget station, you're going to try one of the CircuitWerkes SiteSentry4 or the Sicon-8. What about a site where you might have a Nautel transmitter or maybe some other brand of transmitter I wouldn't be aware of that already has a great looking GUI? Will you just and by the way, the two that we already mentioned, these are not dial-up devices, right? These are IP devices.
The Sicon-8 will do both. It actually has a built-in dial-up modem, so you can dial into it. You record your own voice responses as opposed to having the canned responses like the old ARC-16s or the Gentners or the Signs or anything like that. So you can record and make the channel say whatever you want. So that's kind of a double-edged sword, because it's handy to just be able to program words, but at the same time, having the ability to record whatever you want it to say, then there's no question about what it says when it calls you with an alarm, which is handy.
Gotcha.
As far as, for a setup where you've got a transmitter with a nice GUI like a Nautel or something like that, we've done it a couple of different ways. I have a few sites that we've installed Burke stuff along with those and used, a mix of analog and SNMP for monitoring. And then I have some others where we've put just some CircuitWerkes stuff in alongside the transmitter to monitor peripheral things, room temperature and door sensors and air pressure and things like that. And then I have a few where we've actually used some of the external logic on the transmitter itself to monitor a few basic things around the site. And that seems to work relatively well in very, non-complex. I just want to monitor 2 or 3 things that are, an analog a digital input where it's just an on-off. You can wire it into the remote control and set it up in the AUI, and it'll notify you as an input.
Okay. You mentioned SNMP. So what? Tell me at what level do you say, SNMP is going to be an important part of our remote control strategy for this site? What makes that decision for you?
The level of equipment that is installed, a lot of the newer devices, whether it be a transmitter or I'm trying to think of what else we've done recently that had SNMP built into it. Some of the higher end switch controllers have them now. Mm-hmm. There are lots of other devices that you can get and install at a site that have SNMP built into them. The big question is if it has it and you're able to interface it to cut down on wiring and analog interfaces, because the less things you have to connect physically to a remote control, the better off you are from a protection standpoint, because the more wires you have going between peripheral devices, you and I both know that increases the chances of something getting blown up in a lightning strike. So if you can use it completely over IP through SNMP or some other type of IP control, that decreases the amount of wiring, which also decreases the amount of physical labor and reduces your chances of blowing up the control circuitry in your remote control. So we're starting to, I am by no means an SNMP expert. We're starting to do more of it because we're starting to do some more high-end installs with newer transmitters and newer devices that have the ability to be controlled through SNMP. So I'm still kind of getting my feet wet on that as well. I have some guys that work with me that know it a lot better than I do.
So we've been talking about IP connectivity to a transmitter site with the different remote control solutions we've been talking about here. And I realize the Sicon-8 also still does dial-up. That's cool. But do you have sites where it's tough to get internet or IP access to it? And if so, how are you accomplishing that?
As far as the sites that I have a hard time getting IP to, and even some that I don't, we're using the MaxxKonnect that you brought up earlier. Okay. I have multiple sites that are running with that as their primary network connection. I actually have one in Birmingham that's running their full-time audio stream over a MaxxKonnect. And we're controlling the transmitter with it and streaming full-time AAC audio to it. And it sounds like $1 million. And actually last night was the first time in almost 4 months that it went down because we had a storm roll through. It took down the Verizon site that it was connected to, and it was down for 12 minutes. But then it came back up without any other kind of intervention. So I would say, down for 12 minutes in 4 months is a pretty good uptime percentage versus, some of your other wireline providers.
That brings up a good question, and maybe Chris could address this too. I'm curious. You mentioned that the Verizon site that your MaxxKonnect at that site connects to went down for a few minutes. Is it normal or is it unusual that at a given rural transmitter site, there would be only one cell site that would be within good range for that device to talk to? I would have thought that, hey, if this site went down, there's probably another one with not nearly as good signal-to-noise ratio because it's farther away, but it might be another site that I'm connecting to. Well, what's the case?
The only reason that this one went down, as far as I can tell, is because the modems that we use have the ability for diversity antenna inputs. This one, because of a problem whenever I ordered the antennas, only ended up getting one external antenna connected to it. So the diversity wasn't set up. So that one antenna connected to that one site, And that site went down, and since it didn't see a diversity, it wasn't able to properly look for another site to connect to. That's as best I can tell. And there are some others that we've done. One in particular that I have diversity antennas set up, and it is far more rural than the one here in Birmingham is, and it's never gone down. And it's been on for almost 4 years. So I think this one is just a case of I only have one antenna hooked up, and it's inside the building due to restrictions in ports of being able to actually get the antenna outside the building with the length of cabling that I've got. So this site was kind of put together hastily. I hate to admit that, but it was. And I've not gotten a chance to get back up there and clean it up simply because the only way that I have it on the air is through that connection. So I can't exactly take it down to reroute cables, or I take them off the air.
Chris, what's been your experience with site redundancy with places that depend on or want to have full-time data over wireless?
Well, I see several sites I've worked on. We have had good fortune of both coax cable via cable system and fiber, so like a hybrid approach, hybrid fiber cable entries into the building. On a few occasions, the wireless or cellular approach was attempted, and as pointed out earlier in our show, I try to explain to folks, don't think that modem you're plugging into is going to work the way you expect. Why not? It's a data modem. Yeah, there's a whole science behind it, and there's a business model that you're not touching that's not going to work. We'll talk about it later with MaxxKonnect. But most of the sites I work at, we have the luxury of good connectivity from the outside, both over copper, in the sense of, say, coax for cable services, and then the fiber, which has become real popular in a lot of places. And there was a place I was just working on a project 6 months ago. Was it South Jersey or middle of New Jersey? An FM station actually found out that their site, they're co-located with a couple of other communication services on a tower. It turns out that all three carriers that they were talking to have fiber coming to the site. So they're trying to work out a deal. I said, you couldn't be any luckier.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
For my own stations, and this might be a workable solution for a lot of our viewers, listeners, who have rural transmitter sites where you don't have cable, DSL is too far away, certainly don't have fiber going out there. At several of the transmitter sites that I'm responsible for in Mississippi, well, we've made friends with a wireless ISP provider, and that provider is covering a dozen or more counties in Mississippi, and it turns out our towers are great hop points for their service. So they've put repeater points, infrastructure type, repeating on a couple of our towers, and then traded internet access with us for that. Not real fast, about 6 megs down, 1.5 meg up. It's pretty reliable, doesn't seem to vary too much. So it's usable in a pinch if we need to stream audio from our internet streaming to one of our transmitters, we could do that. But anyway, that may be a solution. Look for a wireless ISP in your area and see if space on your tower would be helpful to them, and then bam, you might get you some good internet that way.
We do that in North Alabama. I'm sorry, Kirk. We do that in North Alabama with my stations that I own a part of up there. There's a local wireless internet provider up there that covers North Alabama and also has some has service down around the Mobile area, and we do the same thing with him. He provides us service actually to our pretty much every one of our facilities, including our studios, and we've worked out deals with him on some towers and things like that, and that does seem to be a pretty good way to go, depending on what technology they're using as far as radios and what frequencies. If they're doing all unlicensed, I've had a couple of instances where they'll end up doing the unlicensed and the band gets so crowded that the reliability goes down. But if their main backhauls are on licensed radios, then yeah, that tends to be very reliable. Yeah.
My ISP for a transmitter site is actually a WISP provider here in New York City, and we happen to be co-located at their POP. So I've got 210 feet of Cat6 cable going from their POP to my room, and I've got connectivity, and the backbone is completely licensed wireless.
Oh, good deal. Good deal. Hey, folks, you are listening or watching to This Week in Radio Tech, episode 395. And Josh Bohn of Bohn Broadcast is our guest. We're going to be talking about a few more good topics, including this really cool wireless connection technology called MaxxKonnect. We'll be getting to that in just a minute. Our show is brought to you in part by my friends at Omnia Audio, part of the TELUS Alliance. And Omnia Audio features prominently at popular Italian radio station Radio Globo. Now, they're in Rome. They have, different products from the TELUS Alliance, including Axia audio consoles. You can see the unveiling of a brand new Omnia 11 there, aside from lots of other great TELUS gear in action, as the TELUS Alliance chairman of the board and Omnia Audio founder Frank Foti stopped by for a visit at Radio Globo in Rome. Let's have a look.
Questa è la radio che suona. Solo le migliori. Da tutto il mondo.
Secondi alle 15, messaggi in codice in diretta su Radio Globo. What you can do with this? Sleep with fish.
Just a quick video there of some shots from Frank Foti's visit to Radio Globo. And of course, the Omnia audio processors now have just a huge majority of the world market in audio processing. Why? Well, because they're so awesome. And no matter what style of processing that you like or what your budget, Omnia probably has a processor that's just right for you, whether it's a software-only processor like the Omnia SST, that's built on technology from our friend Hans von Zutphen, to the Omnia Volt. This is a total reimagination of the original Omnia 1, and it's got technology in there that is actually part of the Omnia 11 in the little Omnia Volt, 1 rack unit tall, and it's just amazing. And then there's the midline products. Well, there's the Omnia 7. 2 of my stations have Omnia 7s. These are designed by Leif Clayson. So, we've got a lot of great thinkers putting work into our audio processors. The Omnia 9 also, that's got everything but the kitchen sink in it. My goodness, you can trick that baby out with all kinds of HD processing and stream processing, even stream origination for your internet streaming. And then there's the Omnia 11, which is, the thoroughbred of the line. And there's even a brand new software package for the Omnia 11. I believe it's now version 3.5 that they're up to. And boy, if you get version 3.5 and GeForce from Cornelius Gould, wow. Please check it out. If you want your station to sound amazing, absolutely amazing, check out the Omnia line. I just talked to an engineer a couple days ago, and he's got over 5 years of uptime on a couple of Omnia 9s. I said, dude, there's a new software package available for Omnia 9. He says, I don't want to reboot them. They're doing just fine. I'm going to set a record. So thanks a lot to Omnia Audio for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Sure do appreciate you. I'm Kirk Harnack, along with Chris Tobin in Newark, New Jersey, and Josh Bohn of Bohn Broadcasting is with us. Josh, you guys do contract engineering and repair work too, right?
We do. Yeah, we do a lot of contract engineering around the Southeast. We're also working on some big projects in other parts of the country that I'm not allowed to talk about right now because we're still in the negotiation phase. But we've built everything from small studios for high schools and universities to major studio build-outs in big markets. We're working on a couple of transmitter sites right now with Nautel transmitters, Gates Air transmitters. Pretty much anything you need, we can do. I've got a real good team. Proud to have everyone on it. We have a repair shop in Texas, just outside of Dallas and McKinney. I've got Josh Jones and Roddy Rivas down there who do a fabulous job of keeping a lot of really old equipment alive. We're in our 5th year of the repair service, and it's going strong. So, yeah, we keep busy.
That's what I want to ask you about, this idea of repairing old equipment. Now, I have become a bit curmudgeonly on that topic, where you know, if you have totally depreciated the product from your taxes, and it's no longer a benefit to the, yeah, I know to buy a new one would cost money. If you don't have the money, you got to keep fixing the old one. But and you guys, as Josh, you were telling me that you guys go to amazing lengths to obtain parts from, you know, for equipment that the manufacturer's gone. There is no manufacturer anymore to get the parts from, and the parts quantities, maybe somebody bought the company and now those parts are depleted, and yet you'll go on eBay and buy old equipment in other countries and bring it back to the U.S. just so you can have a stock of parts. Give me a little war story about that. But then I want to follow up with, when does that just not make sense anymore? And you need to buy something new because actually it's cheaper now than it ever was before. Talk to me about that.
That is a very common tale. The eBay thing, we do get a lot of stuff on eBay, but we also get a lot of stuff through bizarre back channels, because my guys in Texas are so good at finding things, and their connections through years and years of service in other industries have given them connections all over the world in the telecom industry and the communications industries and things like that. I remember there were I can't even remember what they were now. They were transistors for something in a Marty. Oh no, they were the varactors in an STL10, which have been unobtainium for probably close to 20 years. It was a specially designed part that George Marty specified and had Motorola build, and they were long since depleted, and there is nothing else available that will do that particular function. And I remember I called down there one day and he said, "Oh, I know a guy in Poland. Let me call him." I said, "Okay." So I get a call like 2 days later. "Hey, my guy in Poland is sending us 6 of these." I'm like, "Oh, he only had 6?" He said, "No, he has 20,000. He's just sending us 6 to see if they work." What? Okay. I said, "How much are they?" "Oh, 8 cents a piece." Are you kidding me? So yeah, we got them, and that particular one didn't work. So he had a bunch of other ones that he sent us. They were all Soviet military surplus. So it's like, okay. So we ended up getting some of those, and we've gotten all kinds of other stuff like that. The output module in STL15C transmitters and a bunch of other transmitters are also unobtainium. So we were able to retrofit a similar module, still made by Motorola, that will do the same function. And, you know, there's a minor modification that we do to put that in there, but the output module that was used in the 15C has been discontinued since the mid-90s. So, you know, I found someone that had a stockpile of a module that you could sub in there as the final PA, and we keep those in stock. So, you know, STL15Cs, I'm trying to think what else those will work in. Some of the Mosley STLs, I don't think they'll work. Well, we don't work on the TFTs anymore because those were their own unique brand of problem. But, you know, we've been able to source unobtainium parts for some of this stuff in ways that I never even thought possible, thanks in part mostly to what my team has been able to find.
Wow. So what are some of the popular things that you'll typically work on? Like, you know, the top 2 or 3 models of stuff that people want to keep working and you're able to fix?
Pretty much anything from Marty that isn't late model from BE. The later model stuff that BE built is not, they're not bad products, but they have a lot of BE proprietary stuff in them. So it's harder for us to work on them. But the original Marty gear that came out of Cleburne that was built by George Marty's people there, we were able to get a lot of knowledge from the late Rick Neese, who operated SRS Electronics in Cleburne, which was about an hour and 20 minutes south of my current shop. So we were able to get a lot of insight on what he did, which is one of the reasons why we service so much of the Marty gear. Yeah. But I would say pretty much anything from Marty that's older. We do a lot of Mosley analog STLs, 606s, 6010s, things like that. We cannot do DSPs because there was a lot of proprietary programmed stuff in those that we can't really do anything with. But that, and then Also, Symmetrix 528-8E mic processors. We do a lot of those.
I'll bet.
So,
a lot of caps and pots.
A lot of caps and pots and switches. Yes, the switches that people don't touch for 25 years, and then hey, let's disengage the de-esser. Oh, hey, I don't have any audio anymore. So
and it won't come back.
Or the insert, somebody decides to shove something into an insert on the back, and all the gunk breaks the signal chain. And we work on a lot of those. They're great processors. A lot of the ones we get are from the early 90s, and they still work fine. They just need new caps and a good cleaning inside, and they still work fine. But I would say if I had to guess the three most popular lines that we work on, it would be Marty stuff, Mosley analog stuff, and the 528Es.
So I'm wondering, what about there's a lot of these Italian STLs and FM exciters out there, sold under the name of Armstrong. I think Energionics rebranded some stuff. Of course, there's Bext, and then there's the stuff with the original branding of RVR or whoever it may come from. Do you find that stuff worth working on?
We work on a lot of the RVR stuff. I have a really good relationship with RVR in Miami, and I actually sell a lot of RVR stuff. If people send in a Marty STL system or something that's just completely destroyed. We got one in probably a year ago that a mouse had gotten into and just ruined all the boards. I mean, it was disgusting, like Hantavirus City. And the guy sent me a picture and said, "We're not touching this." So I said, "Okay." And they said, "What should we tell the customer?" I mean, they need an STL, they need something. And I ended up selling them a brand new RVR system. The price was right. That stuff is probably the most reliable analog STL system since the Mosley 6010, 6020 set. And it's real easy to configure. It's heavy because it's very well built, has a giant toroidal transformer in it. But it works very well. There's service centers in Miami. They've been in business forever. And they're just, the RVR stuff is great as far as reliability. I sell a lot of Nautel transmitters because I also work with RF specialties. So I sell a lot of Nautel transmitters. But if someone can't afford a Nautel, then typically if they just want a workhorse transmitter that's going to last forever and without a lot of bells and whistles, I'll send them a quote for an RVR because they run forever.
Speaking of transmitters, I have a question for you about that in just a minute. I want to ask Chris Tobin. Chris, in your experience, what kind of older gear are you either fixing yourself or sending off to have fixed?
Well, let's see. I just recently worked on an Armstrong transmitter, FM, low power FM, and the Italian version. I forget what brand it is for the TV. It was a low power TV, and I recently acquired an RVR exciter, FM exciter, that I have to power up and see if it even functions. The top chassis, the cover of the chassis seems to have been butchered for the screws trying to be pulled out. So we'll see what happens. A lot of the older gear I've worked on BEs and the old Mosley STLs, Marty gear. I mean, all of it. I've been all around with that stuff. There's some stuff that just keeps working. Keep it current. Keep it maintained properly. It'll go for a lifetime.
So the question I want to ask Josh was about transmitters is tube transmitters. Are there still new transmitters that are tube transmitters that are being sold and installed in this country?
Not typically in our experience. The HPX line from Gates Air was probably the last modern tube transmitter that was popular. And I don't know for sure if they're still building the HPX. For some reason, I think they're not, but I don't know. The only other one that, BE still has a line of tube transmitters. The T transmitter is still being manufactured. The design on it hasn't really changed. Those are good transmitters. I maintain quite a few of those over the years, 20Ts, 30Ts, things like that. And then there's the ever popular Continental that the design hasn't changed substantially in 50 years, but they still work, and there's a lot of them in service. So, Continental's kind of drifted away from the broadcast portion of the industry and stuck with shortwave and military, which, I can't really blame them. But as far as new tube transmitters, we haven't installed a tube transmitter other than like a refurbished backup in probably 8-9 years at least.
Chris, are there any places in your part of the world that if they needed to get a new transmitter, it would still be a tube transmitter?
No, most of the folks I've dealt with, it's been solid state transmitters. Some of the issues, well, in the New York City area, the problem you run into is the real estate, the locations, the cost of heat exchange. The tube transmitters, even though they may be great things, you get a good price. The cost of running them in the buildings that you have to be in here in the city can get very costly, and over time, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. Hey, so in a few minutes, in fact, after our last commercial break, we're going to talk about this MaxxKonnect technology. But Josh, I've got one more topic to talk to you about before we go to break, and that is about choosing the right codec, not only the right codec algorithm, but the right codec hardware to send out on different types of remotes, whether it's a pop-up remote at the car dealer or the county fair, or whether it's a regular remote from maybe a club or from a sports venue, a ballpark of some kind, or whether it's a traveling, goes on the road with the team. Talk to us about your selection process. I know you said you do use a lot of tie-line codecs, but how do you decide exactly, what's right for the job to go out on remote?
Well, a lot of it, as far as the actual hardware and the manufacturer, is personal preference on the part of the customer. Comrex products they're rock solid. They've been an industry standard forever. The tie-line products are a little bit newer to the market, but they seem to present a lot more flexibility. There are a lot of features that the tie-line VIA, for example, has that Comrex is working on in their Access NX, but the Access NX isn't shipping yet. So that ended up being a fairly big issue at NAB for one of my clients. Is we ended up having to get source some remote gear for them. They came to NAB, talked to both Comrex and Tie-Line, and one of the big deciding factors was Tie-Line could have them gear in 2 weeks and Comrex couldn't have it to them for 5 months, and that was a big problem. But as far as IP connectivity is the big thing. There have been, for years, ISDN has been the standard for high quality, low latency remotes, especially in big markets. You'd get an ISDN line installed, you'd take your Zephyr out, you'd plug it in, put your SPIDs in, hit connect, and life was good and you didn't have to worry about it. ISDN is almost non-existent now, even in large cities. There are, legacy COs that can still support ISDN and the circuit switch data that it rides on, but a lot of them can't. I can't order a new ISDN line here in Birmingham. It's not possible. I can barely order a new T1 here. Everything they do, they want to do on fiber and provide via IP. So what we look at is, how is it going to hold up long term as far as, does it include any kind of, protective case, because techs tend to beat up remote gear? How well is it built? Luckily the VIA and the Access are both fairly rugged. What is the ease of use from the operator standpoint? How difficult is it to create a new connection? Is it intuitive? Does it have a touch screen? Does it have, a button pad that you have to kind of navigate your way through menus, things like that? And like I said, we use a lot of tie-line gear. It holds up very well. It works great on every type of connection that we've tried. I've done it on bad Wi-Fi connections, good Wi-Fi connections, wired Ethernet, really crappy DSL, and every layer and provider of 4G. We've done the beta testing on all of them, and it holds up as good as anything we've tried. So, like I said, we did a remote yesterday from the Regions Tradition with a tie-line VIA connected to a Merlin back at the studio, and we did it with a MaxxKonnect modem, and it hooked up, and we did a 2-hour broadcast, and it sounded fine the whole time. No dropouts, no hiccups, and the guys next to us were using a kludged together thing. I don't even really know what it was, but they were doing it with a different Verizon 4G modem that was more consumer grade, and it just didn't hold up. Their remote wouldn't work. They tried to connect to the Wi-Fi at the venue, and it didn't really work. They ended up going to Skype, and even it wasn't really reliable. So, a lot of it is choosing the right equipment, having the right internet service is a big part of it. It's hard to do a high quality remote if you don't have reliable internet, because that's where everything's going. It's, if you have internet into your building and you're using it for anything mission critical, you need to have some kind of a backup for it. Whether, if you have a connection from a cable provider, you need to then, get a DSL in there as a backup. Even if you have fiber, get something to back up that fiber, whether it's cable or something wireless like a 4G connection or something, because backhoe fade is a real thing, and it can really shut you down at the most inopportune time, like in the middle of your morning show or in the middle of your major remote from the local big sporting event.
Quickly, when is it appropriate to do a remote using only a smartphone and maybe an app, from Lucy or from Tyline or Comrex, just an app, or using, say, Comrex's Opal technology, where you're using WebRTC. You may not know it, but that's what you're using. When is that okay?
I think that's okay from a technical standpoint. Anytime you're doing just a music station remote where you're doing cut-ins. You cut into a 45-second break and going into a stop set, or you're just cutting in between songs or something like that. That's typically when I see that used. And it's great for that kind of stuff, because, if you have, whether it's a Lucy Live connecting to a Zip1 or Tyline's reported app, or, you're, like you said, you're connecting to an Opal or something like that. In the day of the iPhone and the iRig, you can have a real microphone, headphones, and your iPhone, and do a remote that sounds better than a Marty sounded 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And, you don't have to haul 5 cases worth of stuff out there with you. You don't have to worry about inferior audio quality. You plug it in, it works. When you're done, you hit hang up, put everything back in your pocket, and go home. It's just, you can walk around and interview people in the crowd. You can put the client on the air and, not have, because I remember we used to do cell phone remotes, and everybody always complained about how awful they sounded. And there were guys that would do cell phone remotes, and they would interview the client, and they would literally pass the cell phone back and forth between them and the client. And it was just awful. And I can't imagine anyone still doing that in this day and age. I'm sure some people do, but thankfully I haven't seen that in quite a while, because with the dawn of 4G and high-speed internet on your phone, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to use some type of codec app to connect to a device back at the station. I mean, my God, you can do decent remotes on Skype with your smartphone if there's no other option. So, those are a lot. There are a lot of great technologies out there that won't cost you a lot of money, that will allow you to elevate the sound of your station and your remotes.
All right. Hey, we're going to take a quick break and hear from our friends at Lavo. Lavo.com/TWiRT. Be sure you put the /TWiRT on there if you go to their website. Check out their gear. Take you right to the radio stuff, and that'll let you know that we sent you. Really appreciate that. Let's hear from Lavo. We'll be right back.
There has probably never been a better time in history to buy a new radio mixing console. Today's consoles are more sophisticated than ever, with more features and functions than you can shake a stick at. But have you noticed how complicated they are? There's a sea of knobs and switches and displays and buttons. Some of them look like you might need a pilot's license to do your show. Well, a board doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful. Just look at the new Ruby mixing surface from Lavo. The first thing you notice is how smooth and streamlined it is. Ruby has lots of cool tech, but what it doesn't have is that confusing ocean of buttons that clutter things up. Now, we all know that there are some console features the jock only uses once in a while, so why dedicate controls to them? Ruby fixes this problem by moving those once-in-a-blue-moon controls to a touch-sensitive, customizable GUI that happily shares screen space with your other studio software, helping you fight control room clutter. Thanks to this design innovation, talent that use Ruby produce smoother shows with less errors. Controls that are used the most fall naturally to hand, while functions that rarely need adjustment are easily controlled with just a couple of clicks in the context-sensitive GUI. And Ruby has cool features you won't find on other boards, like Auto Mix, an intelligent gain writing function that guarantees the perfect mix for multi-mic morning shows and call-in segments. Dual mode snapshots that instantly switch the motorized faders between on-air and production modes, and enough DSP and I/O options to make even your pro sound pals green with envy. And because quality is as important to Lavo as it is to you, every console is proudly built to fanatically precise standards at Lavo's own factory in Germany. If you're ready to declutter your control room, do yourself a favor. Check out the new Ruby and the other cool Lavo radio tech at www.lawo.com/TWiRT.
Thanks a lot to Lavo at lavo.com/TWiRT for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Some really great technology there. And audio over IP. I mean, everybody's doing it now, and we're so glad that they are. Let's things connect together. Josh, and we're going to talk about MaxxKonnect. I want to hear a quick comment about audio over IP. I would guess that a lot of the studios you're building nowadays are AOIP studios. Would that be right, or are people still doing analog?
No, that's correct. Most of what we're doing is audio over IP. We're actually doing one right now that's a full WheatNet build. Paul Burt that works with me. Paul's done a lot of Axia installs. Paul worked for Cumulus in a couple of different markets. So we've done Axia installs in the past. It's just a matter of, again, it's client preference. It's whatever we kind of leave it up to them on what they would want to do. Livewire, WheatNet, SAS, they're all great systems, and they definitely decrease the need for installation wiring. It cuts down on the time. The flexibility and reliability is so much better. Audio over IP is, it's just great. I mean, I know that sounds corny, but it is. It's fun to work with. And, the fact that you can make a Cat5 cable and plug it in and plug a dongle into the end of it and hook it up, and you're not sitting there with a soldering iron for half an hour making an audio cable. It's just, it has streamlined things. And my stress level has gone down so much when I have to build a studio. It's just amazing.
When Chris Tobin, you can identify or maybe add to this. When I was in Hawaii a month ago, the only time I had to get a soldering iron out was to extend the mic. No, actually, to put the connectors, the XLR connectors, onto the Yellowtech mic arm cables, because it comes pre-threaded with a cable. But unfortunately, the cable at the long end isn't long. I wish they'd ship it with a 20-foot cable with an XLR already on it. If I have to cut it off and redo it, okay. If I just want to bundle it up, that'd be fine too. So yeah, I kept putting that off. Oh, I'm gonna have to get the soldering iron out and get it hot and smell that stuff and maybe burn the carpet because I dropped it. Chris, what do you do? Are you having to solder much, Chris?
Well, actually, I did do some soldering recently. I had to make a DB connector for the back of a CD player for remote start. So yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yuck! You didn't buy a breakout board. Who solders D connectors? What? Yeah.
I did too. I forgot about it. In fact, I had to solder D subs for the on-air tally light at the station and to run the Henry Super Relay.
No. Winford Engineering is your friend, man. I'll tell you. Well, I keep a box of those, and when they run low, I call them up and order more because I despise D sub connectors. Oh man.
And I think besides Winford, also Studio Hub, Radio Systems has those too.
They do. They do. The Winford stuff is that is a very broad base. They sell them for all the different industries. But if you want something broadcast specific, the Studio Hub stuff is really nice.
All right. Well, we've been teasing this MaxxKonnect technology, and so, folks, this is a little bit of a commercial, but we're going to talk about the tech and why it actually works for you. So let's say that you have a remote transmitter site or someplace where you need primary internet or backup internet, or you're going to go do remote broadcasts and you can't depend on, the high school providing decent Wi-Fi because, all the kids are on there, taking pictures of the homecoming queen. You got to have reliable connectivity, no matter how good and how many automatic things a codec offers. And I'm familiar with the Telos Zip 1. It does an awful lot, but if it's got no bits going back and forth for a while, it's not going to pass any audio at all. And so MaxxKonnect is a technology and a product that Josh has been working with. Josh, take it away and tell us about this.
Well, it's standard 4G internet with a much higher QoS and prioritization on the Verizon network than what you're going to get from any other Verizon kind of deal. We have a fairly high service level agreement with them as far as where our priority is on the tower. And I've mentioned this a couple of times. You know, we did a broadcast yesterday at the Regent's Tradition. There were 15,000 people scattered about the Greystone Founders Golf Course here in Birmingham. And there is one cell tower that looks down into that valley that has that golf course in it. So Verizon, AT&T, everybody was maxed out as far as what they could do to try to handle the load. Nobody had decent data connectivity. My phone was working for calling, but it wasn't working for much else because it's a consumer grade device. So we went out and, like I said, we set up our remote, plugged in the MaxxKonnect modem, hit connect, it connected. We did a 2-hour broadcast with it. Sounded like $1 million. The next tent over was a neighboring radio station. They had a standard Verizon Air card plugged into their remote box, and it wouldn't work at all because the bandwidth on the tower was maxed out. That higher prioritization and higher QoS of the MaxxKonnect and the service level that we can offer versus a standard plan with Verizon really makes a difference in situations where you have a congested cell or major sporting events. We're actually going to be deploying one next weekend at the Indy 500 to test it in a major event arena. When I say major, we're talking 500,000 people, cows set up, things like that. That's going to be the granddaddy of tests to see how well it performs at a remote, because I know connectivity at, major football arenas and, stadiums for baseball games and races and things like that can always be a problem. So that's the one instance that I've not been able to test in all the years that we've been beta testing this. And this is the one we're going to do it next weekend and see how it works. So that'll be the test. I was very pleased with what happened here at the golf tournament. So we'll see how it works at a major race.
For years, I had been told, and I'm sure I wasn't asking the right people, but I've been told that there was no such thing as higher priority service availability on a cellular network. And I couldn't believe that was true. I got to believe that fire, police, somebody can, get a call through or get data through when others can't. I'm sorry. And Chris, you're about to say something. Go right ahead, please.
Oh, no, I'm just saying it's not true. There is all levels of priority. If you read up on the spec, free GPP spec, and a few other things, you'll discover that the services are there, and just a question of whether you want to pay for it or not.
Okay. All right. So, Josh, you've working through a third party. You've been able to get that level of service. Yeah.
We're partnered with another group that provides monitoring, video streaming, and things like that, security monitoring for oil well installations, mining sites, things like that don't have any kind of infrastructure connectivity. And between what we do and what they do, we were able to put together enough of an incentive for Verizon to give us a higher level service agreement. So we were able to get that. We were able to get that level of service between providing connectivity to broadcast sites as a critical way of alerting the public, and then also the high security necessary for mines for safety, oil wells for safety. They have to have reliable data to stream the camera video back to their monitoring centers. So that's where this all came from. And there are enough of these deployed throughout the collective industries that it made it worthwhile, and it makes it affordable for us to be able to offer it to broadcasters as a backup or as a primary. Like I said, I have a station that's using it as a primary STL. I've got multiple other stations that are deploying them as backups. They're using them for telemetry. A lot of places are replacing their DSLs with them because the level of reliability versus what you get from a DSL, and as well as the speeds in most cases, are significantly better. And DSL prices, especially for remote sites, can be far more than what our 10 gig plan is at $129 a month. It includes a static IP address. It has the higher level of priority. We include friendly name forwards, which is kind of cool. If you've got a transmitter site and you've got 3 or 4 devices there, and you don't want to have to try to remember those remote control names, or I'm sorry, you don't want to have to try to remember the IP address and the port number and all that, we'll do a friendly name forward. If your remote control for WXYZ, you can give we'll assign the IP address a friendly name, so you would type wxyzremote.mytransmittersite.com, and it would take you to your remote control. You don't have to remember the IP, or if you need the IP, you type that in, and when it forwards, it actually shows you the IP address and the port. So that way, if you're like, oh, hey, I need that, I've got to put it into something or make an exception for it or whatever, but you don't remember what it was, just key in the friendly name, and it'll tell you what it is. So that's just another feature that we offer.
So you have got a MaxxKonnect box there handy to show, do you?
I don't.
Okay, that's
actually
right.
I had one sitting here until 2 days ago, and somebody needed it. And I shipped it out. So
it looks like some models of, say, Cradlepoint modem, yeah, and it does have SIM cards that go in it, 1 or 2 SIM cards.
There's a couple of different configurations that we can offer. We use Cradlepoint hardware for a lot of it. We're using MBR series routers, and I'm still using a lot of USB modems, a lot of UML 290s, and we just put the security cover on them. We also, if we're using MBR 1400Bs, I try to use the Cradlepoint modem that will allow you to plug into the side of the router. You can see it in the image that's on the screen right there. The right side of the router has the USB ports. There's a modem that actually clicks onto there that has the external antenna ports, and then the SIM card gets embedded in that. We're also beta testing some hardware from Netcom Wireless that has a lot more integrated. The SIM card is integrated into it. It has some additional monitoring functionality that your standard Cradlepoint stuff won't. So you can actually put, I think it's 3 analog or digital inputs into it, and it will actually send you email alerts. So if you have a basic site, going back to what you mentioned earlier, if you have an IP connected transmitter like a Nautel or a BW or something, and you just want to monitor, door status, the temperature in the room, and RF on or something like that, you can actually wire those directly into this Netcom router and have the router email you for alarms based on those inputs. It also has a remote reset. So if you if you wanted to have it reset by, I don't know, if the transmitter shuts off or something like that, you can have it reset that router or whatever. It's really kind of cool, and it's an all-in-one solution that fits broadcasters very well because it's fairly small. It's actually this is my phone. It's actually smaller than my phone. My phone is huge, but the Netcom box is smaller than that, and it has the built-in antenna ports on the end of it. So, any standard 4G antenna with an SMA connector can connect to it, so you can get your outdoor diversity antennas to increase your signal.
Wow. Sounds like there's a lot of options. Chris, you have any questions before we ask Josh where folks can go for information on this?
Oh, no. Josh and I spoke at NAB, and I think we need to, at some point for your beta testing, do another high density place, sort of like Times Square, maybe here in the New York City area, to give you a box.
I would have to come to Times Square and test that with you. That's the caveat there. So
that's fine, and we could go around and do some other testing places. Then, if that's the case, we'll have some fun. That
would be awesome. Yes, I haven't been to New York in about 10 years. I used to ride the train up there when I was in college because I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I always loved coming up there. So I need to find a reason to come back up there and visit you.
Okay, well, fair enough.
Now, you boys need to come to Knoxville, Tennessee during the UT football game when the Big Orange is playing and the Volunteers score a touchdown. Now everybody sings Rocky Top. because that's going to be a lot of phone calls going on right there.
Come on down to Tuscaloosa. I've had MaxxKonnect deployed in Tuscaloosa for 4 years.
Yep. The Crimson Tide.
They use a MaxxKonnect router that is velcroed to the top of a portable Zephyr IP, which has the mixer built into it, and the sports guys love it. They turn it on, they let it negotiate, they hit connect on their Zephyr IP, it hooks up to the Zephyr in the rack back at the station, and they do the broadcast from the quad on the 4G MaxxKonnect, and it works like a champ. It's been working like a champ for the last 2 years. So
this sounds like such a great solution. I'll put the link in the show notes, but you can go to mkbroadcast.com and see it there. mkbroadcast.com. Again, we'll have that in the show notes. This is not a paid-for commercial. I thought this was just a cool product, and it's frankly, as for several years, I was the product manager of the Telos Zip 1, and I wanted this kind of technology and kept running into roadblocks as far as getting some way to get a higher level of QoS with the wireless carriers. Obviously, I wasn't asking the right people, but so far as I know, other players in the broadcast codec game were getting a lot of the same answer. Now, one solution was to use, diversity, use 2 or more different carriers. And that's what a lot of TV stations are doing. And some radio stations are doing as well. And I know Comrex has this built into some of their products now. But this is actually using, one modem and a high QoS, right?
Well, and the nice thing about it is we can do. Well, let me rephrase that. MaxxKonnect, yes, it's using one carrier. It's using a higher QoS on the Verizon network as well as prioritization on the tower. But the hardware that we send out, other than the Netcom routers that we're working on, but all of the Cradlepoint stuff that we send out has the ability to do multiple carriers because they all have multiple USB ports. So if you get a MaxxKonnect router and it has the MaxxKonnect in it, but you have an AT&T plan that you would like to use with that, you don't have to get rid of your AT&T. If you want that level of redundancy, you can just plug your AT&T modem into the other USB port on the router, configure it for redundancy or however you would like to do it. It'll grab whichever one's working the best and use that. So we give you the flexibility with most of our hardware to use carriers of your choice alongside with the MaxxKonnect product.
Cool. Hey, I'd love for you to take your smartphone out to one of your venues where you have a whole lot of people there that would be difficult to even make a phone call or load a web page. And right next to you have your guys using MaxxKonnect to do a live broadcast. Yeah, we're doing 300 kilobits per second either direction, and we're not getting any dropouts. It's just sitting here working. That would be cool.
And the nice thing about it is we figured out with the full-time audio delivery with the station that I'm doing here in Birmingham, 64K AAC running full-time for a month uses about 24 gigs of data. That's in one direction. So if you're using it for full-time STL, and 24 gigs a month would require you to get 30 gigs worth of plan to make sure you had the overhead to do whatever you would need. So you're looking at about $320, which it gives you, other than the rare instances where a Verizon tower goes down and it doesn't change over, which is unusual, but it does happen occasionally. I've found the reliability on it to rival that of a T1 in a lot of cases, because the T1 telecom infrastructure in a lot of major cities hasn't been maintained. Now, it doesn't touch fiber. Fiber, if you can get a fiber connection, and I tell customers this all the time, we'll get you instead of fiber because you're cheaper. I'm like, no, if you want reliability, you need to get the fiber. If I had the option to get fiber, I would. I used MaxxKonnect here in my office for 5 years because all we had available in this area was DSL, and it was awful. And they finally put fiber into here last year, and there was no question. The second fiber was available. I put it in here. I've lost internet once for 20 minutes in a year and a half. So, I mean, you can't touch something that's delivered on glass. That's just the way that's just the way the systems are built now. But if you have remote sites where connectivity is a problem, or the other thing that this is good for, because each one of these has a static IP address, and the static IP address is it stays with the device and the SIM card. It's not a location specific static IP. You can use these for your remote codecs and increase your network security, because I know a lot of broadcasters that use their tie-line gear or their zips or whatever, and they have to either hang it off of a Comrex, or hang it off of an outside cable connection or an outside DSL, or you have to open a gaping hole in your firewall that allows connections from anybody. And there have been a lot of cases where like Russian spammers or, Chinese hackers or something like that will connect to a codec and just tie it up. So then your remote tech or your talent go out and they try to connect and they can't. It says line busy. Well, somebody's connected to your codec and you don't know whether they're just connected to be annoying or whether they're trying to hack your network. Well, with the MaxxKonnect, that's not a problem anymore because you get a full static IP, and it is an outside static IP. There are a lot of cases where people will order static IPs from Verizon, and you will get what they call a private NATed static IP, which means mobile to mobile. You have no problem getting back and forth. As soon as you try to go mobile to any other network, it says we can't find this. So you can define the rules in your firewall to open a port, but only allow your 5 MaxxKonnect IP addresses to connect to it.
Exactly.
So you've just locked out everybody else. And increase your network security, and you don't have to have some random Comcast connection or a DSL that might go down, and then a separate management computer that is of no use to you other than to remote into those codecs. So that's just another added benefit that we can offer through the MaxxKonnect technology.
It's a great idea. And boy, we're out of time. Josh, I appreciate the work that you and your company have done to make this available along with your partner. It's what a lot of people are looking for. People tell us about this all the time. How can we get a better QoS? And this is certainly a way to get that done. Chris Tobin, any last comments before we go?
Oh, just I got an email from one of our viewers, Jim at the Greater New York Council, somewhere in New York City. He was asking about the MaxxKonnect and who makes it and where is it available. And I just wrote back to him and said, if you're watching the This Week in Radio Tech, then you'll know exactly what's going on. So just a shout out to that person. And apparently has a project this summer that might be involving some wireless needs. So Josh, you may be getting more customers.
Yeah, the website is
that would be great.
It's mkbroadcast.com, as in MaxxKonnect broadcast. MK connect with a K, because I'm sure C wasn't available. So MaxxKonnect broadcast.
Two X's and a K. Yes.
Yeah, we had to go there. We'll have the link in the show notes. All right, we got to go. Suncast has to go. I got to go. And Josh, it's been a pleasure to have you with us. Lots of practical ideas from a real world working engineer. Not that Chris isn't. Not that I'm not. Well, I'm not a lot. But thank you so much for joining us with a lot of practical good ideas. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Chris Tobin, thank you for joining us. I always appreciate you being here. And by the way, Chris, next week, it might be just you and me.
Okay, fair enough. I can work with that.
Well, sometimes those are the best shows. I don't know why, but sometimes not. And we've got a couple of cool things coming up as well. A broadcast engineer expert at doing remotes in tough situations at low budget. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks. And we've got an engineer from a company called Nuance. It's going to be pretty interesting. It might be rather nuanced. All that's coming up in future episodes of This Week in Radio Tech. Tell your friends. Thanks to our sponsors, the Telos Alliance and Omnia Audio, and the great audio processors from Omnia Audio, and Lavo. And go to their website at lavo.com/TWiRT. Thanks to Suncast, our producer, for producing the show. And thanks to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. Josh and Chris, thank you guys. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.